My psycho ex-boyfriend has been cheating not only on me, but with literally every single woman he's ever been with for several years. So after having my heart broken and watching my entire life fall apart, my best friend and I decided to get some revenge by quite literally ruining his life from the ground up. Here's what happened. So in a nutshell, my ex-boyfriend, who we will call Seth, could be pretty accurately described as a sociopath. Of course, that was never apparent to me while we were dating, but those familiar with ASPD will know that many sociopaths wear an elaborate mask and lie as easily as breathing, and this was definitely true for Seth. When I met him, we quickly became close friends. We had a couple of weeks in there where we thought we might start dating, but he wanted to move way faster than I was ready for, so we remained in the friend zone instead. He was progressive and emotionally intelligent and generous. We loved the same music and shows and activities, and he showed vulnerability. He even shared his traumatic childhood background with me. And as a side note, he leaned on this story often as a pillar of his victimhood, which he uses to manipulate everybody else around him. He also shared very early on, before anything physical ever happened, that he has HSV2. Not to say that there were zero red flags about this guy, but the good I saw in him was so overwhelming that I had an easy time dismissing them. We started dating in a weird way. During our friend zone time that lasted about a year, he had moved out of state to be with a new partner by the name of Melody, who he had been dating for only a few months. He never shared a lot of details about her, and I had assumed that they had some kind of history that explained the seemingly sudden seriousness of their relationship. Then, seriously, like 2 months into the move, Seth started to message me in a more flirty way. He told me he loved me, and that it took moving away to realize what he had. Obviously, this made me really uncomfortable. I told him I wasn't interested in being the other woman, or in a long-distance relationship of any kind, and that he and I needed to keep it platonic. He supposedly tried to make it work with her for several more months, while also telling me how she was an alcoholic, and that she would yell at him and all this other stuff. Eventually, he told me that they broke up, and that he was making arrangements to move back, but he was still living with her though. He then began sending increasingly flirtatious and romantic messages, and this is the point where I almost escaped him, but he was clever enough to make friends with my roommate, who we will call Eris, since Eris and I had been living together for 7 years. A serendipitous friend of a friend turned to a roommate situation eventually evolved into a deep friendship. Eris helped convince me that he was really a good guy who was madly in love with me, and that despite the weirdness of his moving out of state and then changing his mind, I should finally give him a real chance. And this is where I can truly say I messed up big time. Now, without going into great detail about the relationship, I can say that the typical idolize and devalue pattern of emotional mistreatment began to emerge pretty soon after we moved in together. Even though he was really sweet most of the time, he moved into the townhouse I shared with Eris about a year after he moved back to town, and we had begun dating officially for 6 months. He lived with us for about a year and a half. Now, with that bit of background out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Just like any good sociopath, he was lying about a lot, being manipulative, and cheating like you would not believe. Seeing as this post is already way too long, I probably should skip to the story of how Eris caught him cheating. Now, by sheer intuition, they glanced at his phone one evening when the three of us were at home together. They saw him open, close, and then like an Instagram DM that was definitely a spicy picture, if you know what I mean. When Eris saw this, they instantly texted me as I was sitting opposite him on the couch, and you know what? I called him out. He angled his phone away from me to delete the message thread, but Eris saw him do it. He then gaslit the both of us and denied it. He denied the DM, he denied deleting it, and honestly, I didn't know who to believe, either my partner or my best friend. Now, I really believe them both, and I thought there must be some rational explanation that lets Seth off the hook without invalidating what I believe Eris saw. I could not believe that he could look me dead in the eye and lie to me like that, and he even cried and played the victim in all of this. A day later, he came up with a plausible explanation for the spicy photo in his DMs. He said that the photo was sent to his friend by a fan of their band because she had gotten a tattoo of their logo or something like that, and that the friend sent it to him to say, hey, check this out, which by the way is super gross. He had private conversations with both myself and Eris, and we later found out that he had used different reasons, all catered to our own biases, just to excuse himself for lying and gaslighting. For Eris, it was his religious trauma, and to me, it was past relationship trauma of his insecure and paranoid ex over-policing his social media use. At this point, he was on thin ice with me, and I didn't really know how he was going to be able to rebuild the trust, but we lived together and had just adopted a dog together, and our lives were so intertwined, I just wanted to go back to normal if we could. I really wanted to believe him and not blow up our lives over some spicy pictures on his phone. Then, just a couple of weeks later, Eris went to a party at Seth's ex-roommate's house. Seth had left the roommate situation on pretty bad terms, burning the bridge with the ex-roommate who we will call Loon. Well, one of Loon's friends who we will call Holly pulled Eris aside to tell them that Seth was cheating on me. Apparently, Holly had been sending some spicy text messages with Seth a few months back and was basically sending some very spicy pictures as well, if you know what I mean. He then began to get really pushy about convincing her to spend more quality time with him and another girl who we will call Tiara, and he even sent spicy pictures of Tiara over to Holly. Well, she eventually got grossed out by him and ghosted him, and he responded to the ghosting by getting upset and aggressive with her. When he was confronted, he denied everything and willingly handed over his phone, which had of course been scrubbed of all evidence. He gaslit, he denied, he cried, and he even threw up. I asked him for the truth so many times, but he gazed into my eyes and told me I was the love of his life and that none of this made any sense, even asking why Holly would make this up. I wanted to believe him so bad, but I contacted Holly and she provided receipts. And when I saw this, I kicked him out immediately. He packed up some clothing and left that night. I told him to get the rest of his crap while I was at work and to never speak to me again. Then I blocked him on everything, and that was the last time I spoke to him. But Eris was not so tolerant, because this begins the most satisfying part of this story. As Seth was packing his bags to get out that first night, I was numb and in shock, and still very used to protecting his feelings and shielding him from my friend's criticism. So I didn't let Eris vandalize his car like they wanted to. Well, they did write liar on the hood of his car in lipstick, and we even took some pictures of it. But after he left, Eris did the thing that would open Pandora's box. They posted a warning on social media. They are something of an internet personality and make their living on TikTok, so their Instagram has decent reach. The Instagram story simply showed his profile and gave the warning that he is a liar and a cheater. Well, the release of this information made Seth come a day earlier than planned to get the rest of his stuff. Now, I was at work and planned to stay there until he was gone, but Eris had made plans to make his move as miserable as possible. For starters, the night before he came to pack up, Eris and I unorganized his meticulously curated record collection, moving records into the wrong sleeves while de-alphabetizing the sleeves themselves. Eris wanted to break them, but I wouldn't let them. I was still protecting him in some kind of way, but I did allow them to scratch some and let the dog bite a couple of them and tear some of the inserts. Eris also ripped all the strings off of his bass guitar and threw away one of his pedals when I wasn't around. Now, when he came to collect his stuff, Eris blasted the song IDFWU by Big Sean on repeat until he packed up his soundbar. But then Eris continued to play it on their phone as loud as they could. They threw dog kibble at him as he packed his things in the living room, all while booing him and yelling shame. Eris would also not allow Seth's brother in the house to help him move. For reference, Eris is 6 foot tall and can be very intimidating. Seth argued and tried to bring his brother inside, but Eris physically blocked the door. They then began to yell, "Don't you dare come into my house. You do not have permission to be here. He is not getting help. He is doing this by himself, and he is going to suffer." Eris then mocked and laughed at Seth and took video of him moving his stupid, precious, mid-century modern dresser down the stairs on his own as his brother stood outside completely helpless. Towards the end of his eviction, I messaged Eris that I had found Tiara's Instagram account, and Eris yelled at him, "Oh, we found Tiara." And after that, he had a fire lit under his butt so hot that he finished up so quickly that he forgot to take a bunch of stuff, including his 55-inch Roku TV, an IKEA bar chart, a humidifier, a collection of really nice art supplies, and a cool hanging lamp that we love. So honestly, it was kind of a score for us. Meanwhile, Eris's post blew up locally, and all of a sudden, both Eris and I were receiving DMs from women who had information. He was either in their DMs being creepy, or they had been sending spicy text messages with him, or even worse, they had met up with him and they had spent some quality time together, if you know what I mean. We found that he had a completely different MO with these women, asking them to do really sketchy stuff that he never even brought up with me, pressuring them for spicy photos, pressuring them into making videos with him, if you know what I mean, and getting creepy and pushy with a lot of them. He constructed different lies for different affairs. Some of them were short-term and some were ongoing for months. I'm pretty sure he was cheating with Tiara for about a year, and she thought he and I were open. We found out from an old acquaintance of his that this is not Seth's first public outing for this behavior, and that his behavior back in 2017 ended on very eerily similar terms. After he had moved to New England for his marriage, he had to move back to our state after being outed. As screenshots and stories rolled in, I began to realize that he was not sharing his HSV2 status with any of these women. I saw a screenshot of him telling someone that he had just been tested and that he was negative for any STIs. And at that point, alarms started blaring in my mind. He was not only manipulating women into spending quality time with him by spreading lies about he and I being in an open relationship, but he was also withholding his health information. This is absolutely predatory, period. Eris then makes a another post, and this time much more incriminating, sharing outright that this guy is sketchy in vivid detail. Well, the fallout from the second post is even worse for Seth. At this point, he's losing friends and texting partners in his creepy escapades left and right. We get into contact with the most recent ex, and do you remember how I mentioned Melody earlier in the story? Well, it turns out that he did not break up with Melody when he said he did, and that when he moved back here, she and him were still a couple, so he had been cheating on her with me after all. When I told him we couldn't be flirty or romantic when he was in a relationship, he just decided to pretend he wasn't, but he still later on used the idea that, oh, I made a sacrifice for you and I moved back here, all as some kind of like manipulation tactic with me on many occasions. Now, Melody, fortunately enough, used to live in our city and used to work at the venue that Seth's band was booked to play in the coming week. Well, Melody went ahead and put a word in with the venue, asking them if they really wanted to feature some creep like Seth on their stage. Well, the venue dropped the show, which clued in Seth's bandmates to the situation, who decided to dissolve the band. It's now been over 6 months, and for me, I've had a lot of therapy sessions, and at this point, I'm just trying to move on and recover, and never date another man for the rest of my life. But then, a couple of weeks ago, Eris received some new information. The acquaintance who told us about the ex-wife in New England still follows Seth out of pure hatred, and she shares that he's now posting clues that he's dating someone new. She then provided the Instagram handle of the new partner, let's call her Haley for the sake of the story, and Eris told me that they wanted to reach out, and I said go for it, but just please leave me out of it. Well, it turns out that Seth is back at it with his old patterns. Haley, of course, knew nothing of his public shaming or past behavior. She got the same love bombing and illusion that I got from him, with no pressure for spicy pictures or any other quality time, but instead he was just a sweet and attentive tortured soul with so much love and generosity to give, and he had this sad childhood. But anyways, Eris found out that they've been talking for several months, and Haley lives in New England, and Seth was actually planning to move up there to be with her. And it's like, people, do we see a pattern here or what? She had plane tickets and had planned to come here to visit him the upcoming weekend. Eris provided Haley with all the screenshots she had asked for, and I think even put her in touch with one of the affair partners. Well, feeling empowered with the truth, Haley broke up with Seth and blocked him everywhere. Now, completely unrelated, but we did hear that he had also posted about his car crashing and had borrowed money from one of his last remaining friends to get it fixed. I also hear that he's gone down to part-time at his job and may be on the way to being fired. He works in the music industry and information gets around pretty quickly. I mean, nobody wants a pariah on their payroll. The last I found out from Eris was that Seth is now planning to move to the East Coast to live with his one remaining loyalist pick-me friend, who is the one who paid for his car. So at the end of the day, his life was ruined by cheating on me, and all I had to do was have a very cool friend to make it all happen. My God, this story's amazing. You have one amazing friend who had your back from start to finish. They made this guy's life a living nightmare, and honestly, based on what you described, he absolutely deserved it. This guy was going to so many different people behind your back. I can only imagine how devastating that must have been. Like, not only did you not deserve that, but Seth is a massive piece of garbage, like my God. And obviously all the names in this story are fake, but just think about all the women this guy completely ruined and cheated on and just manipulated in so many different ways. And these are just the women that we know about. God knows how long he'd been doing this and how long he'd been getting away with it. So honestly, I'm so glad you were able to get some kind of revenge from this, because Seth absolutely had it coming. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My entitled Karen neighbor hates me for literally no reason, as she is actively trying to make up lies to create a divide between me and my husband. Here's what happened. Okay, to start things out, my husband and I recently moved into a new place, and our neighbors are either in their 30s or their 40s. We don't talk to anyone, and we really just keep to ourselves. So the first interaction we had was when the neighbor woman dropped by on her own to see who had moved in next door. And this is what she said to me when I came to the door. "Oh, hi there. I just wanted to see who moved in." She then proceeds to ask me questions about myself. She asked me how old I was, and then would say, "Oh, you look too young to be a homeowner. Are you renting? I thought this was a for sale listing. Are you even married? What do you do for work?" And this entire line of questioning just felt incredibly rude. It felt like she was collecting information and knowledge about us. Now, because she only met me that day, as my husband was not home, she decided to show up again on the weekend. This time, my husband answered the door. She was much nicer to him, and because my husband reported such a different interaction to me, we watched it back on the doorbell camera footage, and I told him there was an obvious difference. She was laughing and touching his arm, and not interrogating him, but instead having a conversation. She even made a a joke about how she will make sure to ask him to help her out if she ever needs to do any heavy lifting, and that in and of itself was completely fine. I lightly teased my husband about it, and honestly, it's just there for a bit of context. Over the months, many micro interactions occurred. She would smile and wave and start up small conversations with my husband and continue to laugh and joke lightheartedly. In fact, she complained about her husband to him a lot, and some of it actually got caught on the doorbell camera. But with me, she would have this sour kind of face. She would ask me nosy questions or try to give me unsolicited advice on everything. For example, while commenting on my dress, she would say, "What a lovely little sheer thing you're wearing," with emphasis on the word sheer and a negative connotation, even though I had on a slip underneath and nothing was showing, and I had a layered long jacket on top of it. Other times she would stop me to try and give me advice on household type of things, like what I could cook for my husband or how to clean my own oven. Now, unfortunately, some of our windows are parallel to each other, and a few times I honestly felt like I caught somebody watching. The blinds would always be closed, so I couldn't see who was doing it, but I assumed that between her and her husband, it was probably her. But anyways, I was never doing anything weird, but things always felt so strange. Fast forward and everything escalated when she recently showed up and rang my doorbell and knocked on my door angrily on top of that. I answered the door, and she immediately launched into telling me off for exposing myself and being indecent in my room by changing with the curtains drawn open, because apparently her husband saw everything. I asked her when this happened because I was always aware of that stuff, if not just straight up paranoid. Well, she didn't want to specify, and she didn't want to talk in general. She just wanted to be exacerbated at me. I didn't even get a word in, and she had a full-blown rant and then just started storming away. Now, of course, I thought of a million responses to yell back after the fact, but in the moment, nothing really came out. I was just so shocked. I think I yelled after her and said something like, "Yeah, screw you, you're being weird for lying." And trust me, I never talk like this, so I don't know where that came from, but it made my husband laugh. I was just so frazzled by the accusation that I blurted out. He then told me just to ignore her. He said if she shows up at the door again, he will be the one to step out and talk to her. I tried to go back to a day where I might have changed my clothing in the open like that, and I honestly couldn't think of anything. Well, just like clockwork, she showed up again, and my husband was the one to answer the door. She was probably not expecting him, and her stupid face looked like it was malfunctioning for a second while she rearranged her expression. She asked him if I had mentioned my transgression to him, and she basically made it seem like I was putting on a show for her husband and she had caught me in some kind of way. Well, my husband didn't give her the reaction she wanted because he told her off. She then switched up to saying she was just expressing her concern for his sake, and he told her this conversation is over and she is not welcome showing up at our door anymore. Well, fast forward, and a few days ago in the morning, she ambushed me outside while I was getting my mail. It was still dark, and she suddenly appeared behind me and started yelling. I get startled easily, and I almost had a heart attack. I dropped all my stuff, including my coffee mug with my very hot latte in it, and I think I blacked out or went autopilot or something like that because I involuntarily screamed, and I don't remember doing much else. My husband is currently away for work and won't be back until next week, but her husband heard and came rushing outside. But his presence was not reassuring. It just added to the feeling of being ambushed. He then started touching my shoulder and asking if I was okay, and like doing these swinging motions all over my body to get the coffee off. And it honestly freaked me out even more. I then backed away and I said, "Don't touch me." And I don't think I even registered what she yelled at me about. I left the mug and the mess out there, and I went inside and I called my husband. I could see them at the end of our drive, talking or arguing or something like that, and they stayed there for a while, occasionally glancing towards our front door. I thought about calling the police, and now I regret that I didn't. My husband wants to talk to them when he gets back, but I'm wondering if there is a better course of action here. But anyways, I just wanted to share this story about these crazies who have somehow sucked me into the middle of their sinking marriage, because right now I seriously don't know what to do. Oh man, this really is insane behavior, because this lady clearly has it out for you. Like, let's look at the facts real quick. She's obviously flirting with your husband, and she's getting all buddy-buddy with him in some kind of like weird, creepy way. Like, just look at the first interaction she had with him. She was touching his arm and joking with him. Meanwhile, she's looking at you as if you're like the spawn of Satan. But it's the fact that she tried to spread some false lie about you and try to turn your husband against you as if you're undressing in the window on purpose, for me, is like the nail in the coffin for this lady. There is literally no good excuse for that kind of behavior, and the fact that she tried that in the first place speaks volumes about the type of person that she is. But I know if I was in your shoes and this lady ambushed me out when I was getting the mail, I absolutely would have called the police, especially after her husband basically put his hands on you. Like, that is creepy and that is not okay. So hopefully Hopefully all of this gets resolved and these people leave you alone, because her behavior is not only incredibly creepy, but it's also something that you and your husband absolutely do not deserve. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.